I've been meaning to do this video for quite some time now since we have been into Fiordland, and thought I'd just make a disclaimer about Bushbuck. They do have great gear as far as clothes and that go. I'm not going to discourage you from trying out their gear. They have amazing gear, but some of the things that we took on this trip didn't go to plan, and I thought I'd go through a couple of things about them, and yeah, food, clothes, camera gear, and all that sort of things. A lot of us had quite a lot of Bushbuck gear, the bags especially. We had 3 of them on this trip, and 3 Bushbuck tents. We found with the Bushbuck bags that they ended up tearing around the back shoulder here, as you see in the video.
This is the second casualty we've had of packs breaking. Look at that! It's being held on by like... Oh, you can't stop focusing.
Oh, it was refixed as well, that part.
Yeah. Oh, it might be 3 now. My bad. I think we're gonna leave it. We're gonna just leave it. Look at that beauty.
How I got around the issue with it flopping around while I was walking out is I zip tied around here to there to make sure that this would hold tighter, because I could only get it so far with the broken part being all jammed up in that. Dad ended up having quite a few issues with his one that actually ripped further than mine, and ended up having to drag his down the hill, and we wrote in a letter to Bushbuck themselves about his experience. I've had my bag a wee bit longer. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to use it quite as much as I wanted to in those 2 years, otherwise I probably would have found that out earlier. But yeah, I ended up having the same issue as him, but it just ripped in a different spot a little bit higher than his, and I could tie it off the zip tie to be able to get myself back out. So yeah, we end up emailing them as well, and found that it was quite difficult to actually be able to get anything out of them as far as replacements go. So if you're considering getting a bag, look into somewhere that's got a lifetime warranty. We've found that, yeah, they're good suppliers, they have a lot of gear, but they don't supply the parts that you possibly need to be able to fix a bag. So yeah, my bag is not that old. I've had it for about 2 years, and they had nothing in store to be able to replace it with. Unfortunately, I ended up getting quite angry at them, and they managed to get something sorted for me, so I've managed to replace that strap. We've fixed the problem there. But just keep that in mind. You're better to spend the money. We found them quite floppy as well. When you were walking through the bush, you could watch Matt, who's quite fit. He was powerhousing up these hills, and his bag was flopping side to side, so it's quite uneven. I know that you can obviously fix it a little bit better to yourself, but we had that much gear in our bags that you couldn't really do much more than what you already, you'd fix it to yourself and it would be all good without the gear in. But as soon as you put that heavy gear in and you had to get it up the hill, you're spending 10 days in here, so that's what you have to expect, is that it's going to be quite floppy in general. So that sturdier bag, the thicker straps and all that, you might be adding a wee bit more weight to yourself, but you'll find that you'll probably be better off in the long run as far as things go with carrying that amount of gear through the bush. Another thing that we had go wrong is I've got a Bushbuck tent. We actually all do, but my one seemed to have an issue with the zips on the outside, the weather protection piece. The zip gave way, and we had to Velcro down that side, and leave the Velcro down that side and then just hop out the one side. And me and my partner were sharing a tent at the same time, so that didn't help at all, especially with all of our gear. So we ended up storing most of our stuff in a tarp that I fortunately brought along with me. So yeah, we ended up putting everything underneath that and tying it down with a few extra pegs that I managed to get from Macpac while I was in there looking around for stuff to take with us. So thank you, Macpac, for having those extra pegs. Now that I've bashed Bushbuck a wee bit, I'd like to say that I do actually quite enjoy their clothing. I've got the alpine pants, and me and Taryn have been wearing them for the last year now, and in wet, snowy conditions, these things are actually amazing. I just put my thermals underneath them and go everywhere in them. They're great. So check that sort of thing out. Their clothing is good. Another thing that we found that we could have done better was actually lightening up our bags. We didn't think about it at the time, but the guys were sitting on the side of the hill and suggested that next time if we get into the block again that we would take less of everything as far as what we're all carrying as a group. You pick who's going to be shooting, who's going to be glassing, all that sort of thing comes into play. You can actually lighten up your bags and share things around a bit better. So we're thinking that would take a couple less binos, a few less guns. We all had a gun each, so it just seemed ridiculous to have that many guns. I took quite a lot of camera gear with me as well. If you've got a good enough phone and a spotting scope, you could actually do most of it with that. You're going to be quite close in bush anyway, so your phone's going to be doing enough, and then anything further than that you'll see quite in a distance with the spotting scope anyway, so you'll be able to get away with using just that instead of actual proper cameras and all that. And I found that it fogged out while I was up the top most of the time, the wet weather that you get in there, so you don't actually need to bring in all that sort of heavy gear that you think you need. I took too much stuff. At the end of the day, I took a GoPro, a Nikon P950, my phone, a spotting scope, all this stuff that you really don't need. I would have just stuck to I only ended up using the spotting scope and my phone in general anyway. There was only once that I used the camera down on the flats when we were crossing over creeks and all that sort of thing, so you don't actually need all that. Another thing that we found was clothes. We should have probably taken probably more socks and underwear, if anything, drop down the clothing, because you didn't really get out of the same clothing. If it was wet, you'd put your jacket on and then all that gear underneath was dry anyway, so you're better to stick with just the hunting gear and then getting out of that gear and putting it on your clothes that you're going to go to bed in while you're out there. So if I suggest anything, I'd drop down the clothing that you take, focus on maybe some thermals instead that you can get in and out of, change that. So if something does get wet, that you can put some thermals on, keep warmer that way instead of having big heavy stuff. So yeah, we'd drop down the clothes a little bit by just focusing on more keeping the feet and hands dry, and then everything else you'd just rewear while you're out there, because you're going to get stinky and not be able to wash anyway, so might as well just be stinky the whole time and get in that same gear. As much as it doesn't sound like a pleasant experience, you're better off doing that, keeping the weight down that way too. With food, I went with Go Native. As much as it feels heavier at the time, it's actually a better option because you can use the same water multiple times, where I found with Dad and my brother who went with the backcountry, they had to store more water or get more water from areas, and sometimes you had to go for quite big walks to get to the water, and especially up on the top when you only have the tarns to use. So think about that as another option as well. The Go Natives, I found you just chuck it in the water, boil it, and then you'd use it for a cup of coffee to warm yourself up, or you'd use the water in other ways, or just let it to go cool and use it again in the morning. So yeah, as much as they are heavier, I actually preferred the Go Natives, and it actually turned out that Dad and my brother's bag ended up heavier because they had to cart more water, but also had a lot more packaging in their bag. I had just I just had the Go Natives and little sachets that I found from the supermarket that were a kumara mash. So I only had to use a tiny bit of water overall, and half the time those Go Natives actually made me feel too full, so I didn't bother using the potato for half of it. Another thing we did was we actually had a Ziploc bag between me and my partner. We had just the lunchbox ones, and we had it full of dried fruit, We had a couple of lollies just to keep us going, like we caffeinated lollies. We had some Mentos things. Another thing we had was a breakfast bar, something that was like a wee bit more filling, and some Bolton. We found that actually to be quite nice. And then that kind of got us through the lunchtime period between the two, breakfast and tea. So, yeah. The other thing that we brought was the little sachets of oats. You can actually, I didn't know this, but my partner actually done it, was you can actually rip the tag off and use the packet itself from those boxes. So we just literally poured the hot water inside those little sachets, mixed it up, and then ate some of the dry fruit that we had with it. So it ended up being a perfect breakfast, and I ended up using some pancake mix while we were at the huts. So it worked out perfect. We actually ate like kings for something that was actually quite light between me and my partner. And I think she carried most of the food, and I carried all the tent gear and jackets and that sort of thing that I could get into my bag, so that, yeah, we could kind of split it evenly. If you can do that, go for it. But I found the other thing was that the tents were a bit more cramped. We didn't have anywhere to store our stuff, so you got to think about that too. Have a tarp or something that you can take away if you're going to share a tent with someone, so that you can fold it up and tie it down and all that, because it does get quite windy on the tops if you're up in the tops. One of the things that Callum ended up saying was he's replaced most of his gear with lighter gear. He's spent a wee bit more money on the stuff that can get it down, get that weight down. The grams actually count. We didn't actually think that it would be too bad when you add, 700 grams here, 400 grams there. It all adds up eventually, and end up having, I think one of us ended up having like 38 kgs in his bag. So it was quite heavy, and especially when you're walking up those hills, that's nothing that you want to be carrying. You want to try and keep it in that 20, 24-ish kind of mark. That's probably a happy medium. I don't know, there might be a lighter weight for people that have been in there before, but for us, that, our typical bag would be probably around 24 kgs to 28 for our hunts that we've been on with the gear that we have. So all things considered, that's probably all I have for you right now. Thanks for watching, and yeah, if you're out there doing it, it is a beautiful place. Definitely encourage people to go in and have a look. If you can get down to the Wapiti thing, it's actually just about time for that too, so I'm making this film at the right time really. But yeah, get down and support the guys. They do a mean job, and yeah, we're definitely keen to go back in there. The sandflies are not so bad if you keep moving. You just don't want to stand still. So enjoy.